And so I would make up crazy stories like I got in a helicopter crash or I got in a fight, or I would just make up these crazy elaborate scenarios. And I started to realize that you're doing a disservice to yourself.
This is Enable, the Disability Podcast, where we'll share stories, experiences, support, resources, and more for people with disabilities and different abilities. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. My name is Geoff, DeafGeoff Herbert.
And my name is Kurt Hower. We're talking with Ryan Minic, an entrepreneur and content creator with cerebral palsy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with me, guys.
Ryan, one of the things I love about you is that you share a lot of personal stories online about having CP, and you're very open and honest about it. And you talk about using your walker and real life situations that you've been in through the lens of disability. What made you decide to be so open with your experiences?
Well, what's interesting is that when I was a kid, I actually, growing up, I never told people that I had cerebral palsy. I would make up all kinds of crazy stories about it. And my thinking was, what it's nobody's business. I can, I don't have to have an explanation every time someone comes up to me and asks me, what happened to you? And so I would make up crazy stories like I got in a helicopter crash or I got in a fight, or I would just make up these crazy elaborate scenarios. And I started to realize that you're doing a disservice to yourself, because you're sort of it's not that you're being dishonest to other people, it's that you're sort of there's a difference between privacy and denial. And I feel like I was denying that to myself. And I had a friend and she was like, this was just a few years ago, because prior to a few years ago, I never even talked about my disabilities to anyone. And she was like, you have a lot of stories. You've learned a lot about living with a disability. Like, why don't you ever talk about it? And that's kind of how I started doing stuff on YouTube and being a little bit more open online.
So now that you're a little bit older, what do you say when someone asks you about your disability?
Well, these days it's a little different. I don't tell them I was in a helicopter crash. I just tell them that I have cerebral palsy and that I was born that way. And then, I mean, it depends. If it's kids, for example, if kids come up to you and they're always like, "What happened to your legs?" And then you'll simplify it and just say that I was born like that. It's kind of weird, right? And they're like, "Yeah, that's kind of weird." But yeah, adults, I just tell them that I was born with cerebral palsy and just kinda leave it at that, and they'll usually have follow-up questions, and they'll ask things like, "Does it hurt?" Or, a lot of different questions after that, but at this stage in life, I'm pretty cool with just being straight up with people about it.
One story you recently told was about hiding your disability on dating apps. What lessons can you share from that experience?
Well, to kind of rehash the story for listeners, I'm old enough to remember when Tinder came out, and this is back in the late 2012, early 2013. And back then there was online dating, but there wasn't really any etiquette. Tinder was the first real app that went viral. That was like the left swipe, the left and right swipe. And so there was no playbook. There was no way of doing things. And for me, the challenge was it brought up this weird question of, do you put your walker in your profile? And that question made me feel really weird. It was an awkward question. It's like, because in one sense, it's kind of awkward in general to you're sort of creating marketing materials for yourself in general for attracting a prospective mate. And then it's like to put the walker into it, it just felt so strange. But I ended up going on a date with this woman. We met at the mall, and I'm sitting on my walker. I'm just waiting for her to arrive, and she sees me for the first time, and she's like, the first thing she says to me, "Why didn't you tell me that you have a walker?" And I'm just like, "Oh gosh. Oh no." And I just felt super embarrassed. And she was like, and I'm thinking this is false advertising. You totally just this is false advertising. And the woman, she goes, "Because I bring my grandfather here all the time, and he has a wheelchair. And I know all the accessible routes. I wouldn't have made you walk around the mall." And I was just like, wow, that's Like I just wasn't expecting that. And so after that, I realized that you can be a little bit more open. You should probably just disclose the fact that you have a walker. And the thing that I've learned about life is that I don't know what it's like for dating as a woman, but as a man, I feel like whether it's with relationships or whether it's with your career, you're always kind of getting rejected at some point. I feel like rejected is being rejected is the default. You know, like people are telling you no in your career, or people are telling you no with romantic prospects, and it's sort of the default thing. So it's like you at some point you have to accept that rejection is just the norm. And then the other thing that I think about is that when it comes to having a disability, when you are if you're transparent with people, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or if you have tattoos or if you know, what a certain race. People are going to filter you for whatever reason. But the more transparent you are, you're going to repel people who aren't the right fit for you, and you're going to attract the people that are.
There are any number of mobility devices out there. Why do you use a walker?
I've actually used a walker my entire life. And it's funny that you guys bring up that question because the specific type of walker that I use is called a K walker. They discontinued making it in the United States. And so for the past couple months, I've been just trying to figure out what are you going to do? And, anyways, I guess they now manufacture it overseas in the UK. So now I have to actually import my walker from the UK to the United States, and, it's kind of a bummer because it's probably gonna cost, like, 3 times as much, but I I've always pretty much used a walker, with exception of I had a teacher in 1st grade who had a son that had a wheelchair, and she insisted that I be in a wheelchair too, so in, like, in my early education years, they put me in a wheelchair for school, but I just felt constrained, not like there's anything wrong with the wheelchair, just for me and my personal uh mobility, it's just easier with the walker. I can sit on my walker. Um, I just feel like I have more freedom with it.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I understand that you have a special ability and that last year you got your blue belt in jujitsu. Can you tell us more about that experience?
Oh yeah. Well, I'd always wanted to do martial arts for a really long time, and I thought about doing jujitsu for years, but I just never did it because, I mean, to be honest, I was just kind of afraid. Because you're going to a gym and you're thinking that, I don't know, these people, maybe they're just gonna laugh at you and laugh you out of the place. And I don't know. And I had a disability. I wasn't even sure if I could do it. But there was an instance where I was getting an oil change and I was sitting on my walker outside this auto shop. And in LA, we have a lot of homeless people. So there was a homeless guy who was like screaming and talking to himself, who approached me, and he started screaming at me, like came up really close. And for for that split second, you're in fight or flight. I started, and thankfully nothing happened, and the guy ended up walking away and moving along. But I started thinking to myself, like, what would you do? Like, what would you actually do if this guy attacked you? Like, you don't know anything. And so I was like, all right, we're gonna go to class. So I started training jujitsu, and the first couple years, I mean, it's hard. As a white belt, you go in there, you know absolutely nothing. And then having a disability, it was the thing that surprised me about jujitsu was that I went in there thinking there were a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to do, and was able to do a lot of things. But then there were things that look really easy that I'm like, oh, that's super easy. I can do that. That I just simply can't do. And it's like, wow, that's really crazy. So jujitsu has been I think the biggest experience for me, or the biggest takeaway with jujitsu, is that it really holds a mirror to you. It tells you exactly what you're capable of and what you're incapable of, or what you could get better at. And so the the hardest part, I think, is the emotional part, realizing, oh man, there are some things I'm just never going to be able to do. Um, and it's just, I guess it's just swallowing that pride. And um, it really, it really tames your ego. I'll tell you that.
But you'll never know until you try. So I think it's really cool that you've done it and you stuck with it for as long as you did. You got a blue belt. I mean, higher than I have. I have a black belt, but it's, from the mall. But also, I think you raise a good point about, like, you don't know what you're capable of unless you try it. As someone who's hard of hearing, one of the things that I'm most proud of is becoming a DJ. I've been a DJ for more than 20 years now, and I just love music. And there are some certain sounds or pitches that I have trouble hearing, even with hearing aids. But I can still hear the bass line and the beats and everything, and mixed music and technology has helped me too quite a bit as a DJ, and I just love doing it. Um, and I love music, and I know that you must too, because you previously ran a music interview series called Ryan's Rock Show. Do you have a favorite concert that you've been to?
Oh man, a favorite concert that I've been to? It's really hard to say when it comes to favorites because I've just been to so many concerts just in my lifetime. Um, I could tell you a favorite interview that I did with Ryan's Rock Show, or one of my favorites. And one of my favorite interviews was with a producer named Ross Robinson. Ross Robinson was the producer he did bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit, and he did Slipknot, all of these bands that are massive. He was the guy that brought them to the forefront. He produced all these incredible records. And when I started doing interviews, this is back in I started doing interviews. I did it from 2007 to 2018, and in 2009, I hit him up on MySpace and I was like, "Hey, can I interview you?" He's like, "Yeah, come over to my house." So I went to his house in Venice, and honestly, it was crazy to see platinum records above his washing machine. And it was just a wild experience, and just to sit down and talk with him about all these bands that I grew up listening to. I thought that was pretty incredible.
Ryan, you're currently working as an entrepreneur with AI-powered Shopify app called Pinky Brain. How did you get into e-commerce?
Well, as Jeff was talking about, I basically started my career interviewing rock bands, and then I uh, I simultaneously worked at a legal tech startup, and so I did that for a long time. And at a certain point, I was like, "You got to actually make a real living. Like you're just not. It just wasn't working for me." So in my late 20s, I was like, "Okay." I quit well, when I turned 30, I quit my 9 to 5 job. I cashed out my 401k, and then just was like, all right, I'm going to figure out how to make something work. So just through the process of trial and error, I ended up landing on doing Shopify stuff. And I had a couple e-commerce businesses. One did fairly well, and I just learned Shopify pretty much end to end. And that led me down the path to learning how to build stuff with AI, and ended up building Pinky Brain.
Hmm.
That's cool. Thank you again for joining us, Ryan. Do you have any closing thoughts you would like to share?
One of the things I think about having cerebral palsy and a disability in general is I think a lot about self-reliance. And I think I don't know, I guess I grew up with like my grandfather would always tell me you got to do things yourself, and he's kind of a hard guy. And like, to me, self-reliance is being able to trust your judgment and just knowing that you can figure things out. But what I've learned about self-reliance is that's a skill. That's not something that you're just born with. You're not just born with self-reliance. And I've learned that the way to develop self-reliance is through trial and error. And so the thing about trial and error is that error is just a part of it, and mistakes are a part of it, and that you just have to keep iterating. And if you iterate enough, eventually you'll carve a place for yourself in the world.
Awesome. That's great advice. Thank you again for joining us. This is Enable the Disability Podcast. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
And please share this podcast with your friends and family so we can share more stories about people with different abilities that bring us all together. Thank you.